Right, we're getting people coming on. I know we're still expecting at least one more. David, can you see who is missing from the list of who we're expecting? I'll do a round of introductions when we get going. I know Massimo is expected. It doesn't appear to be here unless he's here under another name.
Joe sent your apologies.
Sorry, I missed that. Is that it?
Joe has sent her apologies. That's what I was saying.
Joe Monk, yeah.
This is great though. I don't know a lot of people on the call, so I'm really excited.
Okay, well, maybe we should start with people just introducing themselves, going around the table, as it were. I'll introduce you. So I'm going to be chairing this. I suggest we do a round of introductions, just briefly, to say who you are and what your interest is in relation to insect farming, and then RNA, Robert, will spend a bit of time talking about some of the things that he's involved in and things he's seeing in North America. And then we have a Q&A session. We've had, I think, a couple of questions sent in advance, so we'll start with those. And then I'll aim to open it up and keep it free-flowing, but obviously managing people's kind of interrupting each other. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is to put their hand up. You're used to this kind of thing, using the reactions thing at the bottom. And if you want to put a question while you've got it in your head into the chat box, feel free to do that. Then we can all see those, and that'll help to kind of give RNA some heads up of what's coming, so he can be well prepared. Okay, so I'm Nick Rousseau. Started the Woven Network about 5 years ago in the UK. Very interested in potential of insect protein. I haven't got any kind of professional investment in it at the moment, but it's certainly something that's growing and it's exciting to see, and we're playing a small part in the Woven Network. And I'll introduce my teammates from the Woven Network. We've actually got quite a number of us now. So David, do you want to say hi?
Yes, it's I put out the Woven Network newsletter, and so I'm taking notes, and we'll produce the video recording and then the a summary in next month's newsletter.
Thanks, David. And Chris?
Hi.
Eating.
Yeah, sorry, I might turn my camera off so that everyone isn't watching me eating my lunch. But hi, I'm Chris Bear, so I'm another director of the Woven Network, and I'm also, my day job is I'm an academic at Cardiff University, where I'm a human geographer, and I'm interested in human-animal relations in the food system. So I've looked at commercial fisheries, dairy farming, and most recently or currently edible insects. So I guess I'm interested in, for example, welfare issues, how relationship between insect farming and other livestock sectors and such like.
Thank you. And last, in terms of the Woven team, Adam, do you want to unmute yourself and say hi?
Hi there. Yeah, so I'm Adam. I'm also a Woven director. I help with the social media side of things and a few other bits and bobs. I also run Instar Farming. So we farm Akita domesticus and produce a cricket powder and whole dried crickets. And we have just started doing a range of flavored crickets as well. So that's sort of what we're trying to push into next, is starting with smoked crickets and then looking to introduce some other flavors down the line. So that should be exciting. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so that's the Woven directors, quite a lot of us on the line. I hope you're all still able to hear me. My internet's a bit dodgy. So Massimo, could you unmute yourself and say hi? Introduce yourself briefly.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm the founder of Bugsolutely, make cricket pasta, and co-founder of Plento. We are developing a snack with cricket powder. I'm based in Bangkok, and I know already some of you, and happy to be here all together.
I'm not sure what time it is there. We're definitely hitting a number of time zones on this call.
7 p.m., yes.
Thank you. Emily, would you like to unmute yourself and say hi? Can't hear you. No, I still can't hear you. Not sure what's happened there. This is the world we live in, isn't it? Trying to communicate. Do you want to type a quick word on the chat, Emily? I'm sorry, I'm not. I hope you can hear us, but we can't hear you. So hopefully you can still get some benefit from it. So, and then maybe Peter. I've got Peter and Jennifer, so I'm not sure who's actually there. Would you like to introduce yourselves, Peter and Jennifer?
Hey, hi, we're based up in Aberdeenshire in Scotland, and we've a cricket farm with banded crickets. We're just in the middle of product development right now, so yeah, nice to meet everybody.
Right. And then the last one who's just appeared, David Allan, coming in from Myanmar. David, are you there? Are you able to unmute and give a quick introduction? Oh, we lost David. Disappeared. Hello. No, David, can you hear us? Just to entertain you, I'm starting something called Stoop Troop. Oh, David. Hi. Oh, hello. Would you like to...
Yes, David here from Myanmar, running a project to understand indigenous practices for insects and look at farming potential here in Myanmar. Been doing this for a number of years. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good to be connected with you all. Okay, I think that may be it for now, but that's fine. So I'll
Emily, were you able to?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
Sorry about this. I'm Emily. I'm a journalist. I'm based in London, and I've been sort of really interested in the topic of insect protein for the past year. I've written quite a few articles in kind of mainstream press, and I'm doing a newsletter as well called Buzzing, which is comes out every fortnight. And it's about, it's basically sort of, there's always a sort of an article about a greater topic, and I also write about my experiments at home, feeding my kids insects and things like that. So there you are.
Right. Personal experience, nothing like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, I think we've covered everyone. A good, interesting cross-section of people, quite a lot of interest in insects as food, but also some in livestock feed as well. So RNA, I'll hand over. Do you want to kind of share your screen or anything, or are you just going to speak?
No, sorry, y'all. I was not able to prepare fancy slides or anything like that, so I'm just going to talk to you face to face. But I'm happy to you know, if there's anything you want to circle back to, anything you want to dive into, no more, let me know. And I'm going to turn off my phone's camera. I've got some audio issues with my computer. But I just wanted to say thank you for being here today. It's really great to see some folks I know. Massimo, so good to see you. It's been so long since we caught up, but I'm thrilled that you're here. And really great to see some new faces. I'm excited to follow up and connect. David, I'd certainly love to talk more about what you're doing. Your project sounds incredibly fascinating. There's some folks here I think that I'd love to connect you to who would be really interested in hearing about it as well and sharing their experiences from the academic side, working with indigenous peoples and their practices. And then Emily, I'd love to chat more with you as the father of a 2-month-old kiddo. Crickets is one of my favorite things to feed. Cricket snacks is one of my favorite things to feed her. And so one of the things I'm actually going to be talking about today is I think one of the big untapped markets is kids and even in really young toddler foods and the potential for insects in it. And so I'll start, I guess, then with who I am. And then I'll give some sort of just bigger picture updates from North America, from the US primarily. And then, yeah, like Nick said, we've got some questions, and then I'm happy to speak to anything. My name is Robert Nathan Allan. Everybody calls me RNA. When I moved to Austin 10 years ago, the first job I had, there was a Robert, a Nathan, and an Allan already working there. So they gave me the nickname. It stuck. Everybody I met was through that first initial friends group. And when I got into the bug industry, that nickname carried over to some of the folks that first met me. And so now everybody except my partner and family calls me RNA. 8 years ago, 2012, I was a bartender. I've got a poli-sci background from university, never really used it. And my mom sent me a video as a joke about eating insects, and I thought it was really interesting. Sort of dove down the rabbit hole. And if any of y'all, for those of y'all who've been just following the topic for that long, before the 2013 FAO report, it was a much more difficult to find really useful information. There were far fewer people that were investing or not even investing funds, but investing their time commercially into the idea of concerted insect agriculture for food, feed, and other raw materials. So when she sent me this video, I was started digging around, and it was most of it was just really dense academic stuff, and I was surprised that more people weren't talking about this. And so I started cold calling entomology departments around the country, saying, I manage a bar in Austin. I want to put bugs on my menu. What do I need to do? And I got some really interesting replies from entomologists, as you might imagine. Some of them were furious, some of them were disgusted. And then, eventually I found one who was like, shh, don't tell anybody. But at the end of every semester, I feed bugs to my students. They love it. We all have a blast. I cook them, I bring them, but don't tell anybody because I don't want the university to shut it down, which was mind blowing. I was like, I can't believe this professor has to be in this sort of like black market bug secret space because it's just so misunderstood by our Western American food culture. So that led me to start Little Herds as a charitable education nonprofit focused on providing information to the public about edible insects, dispelling misinformation, misunderstandings, and find credible, accurate information about nutrition, resource efficiency, things like the ethical and moral implications of different processing and farming methods, and being a resource for information for parents, for teachers, for entrepreneurs, for researchers, for policymakers, regulators, trying to, in some ways, be a little bit of something for everyone. But at the time, there was very little information out there. And so through our inception in 2012 to our founding in 2013, right like 2 months after the big FAO report came out, the timing was great. We've been since then sort of a hub in the industry as a connector, being able to help connect farmers to product makers and help clarify regulatory uncertainties with experts and lawyers and things like that. So it's been a passion in my life since then. 2014 to 2015, I worked with Aspire Food Group for a little over about a year and a half and helped them start their first cricket farm in the US in Austin. Since then, as anybody who has seen them in the news, they have grown light years since the very rudimentary farms that we started. And they're actually now, they're going to be breaking ground next year on a new production facility in London, not the UK, in case you didn't get that one, London, Ontario, which is really exciting. They're still going to continue to operate and be headquartered here in Austin, which is actually really exciting because they're from Canada originally. Yeah, I worked with them for about a year and a half, and it was a great experience for me to be able to learn very hands-on, how to farm crickets, how to grow crickets, how to breed crickets, how to harvest crickets, process them, package them, label them, sell them, all that. Gave me a really good broad view of what a lot of you deal with at different links in the supply chain, different areas of the industry. After that, I left Aspire on really good terms, wanted to come back to Little Herds and really focus on it to help grow the industry as a whole instead of focusing on just one company. And through that, worked with some of the academics and the entomologists that really had been leading this discussion in the academic side in the US for years, folks like Florence Dunkel, Dr. Marianne Shockley, Julie Lesnick, and helped start the first U.S. academic conference series, the Eating Insects The first one was in Detroit in 2016. 2018 was in Athens. Unfortunately, obviously, didn't have one this year, but we'll definitely be doing more of those in the future. And that's really where NACIA, the North American Coalition for Insect Agriculture, sister trade association with Woven, that's really where it became conceived in 2016 at that conference. We were able to, for the first time, really ever have, hundreds of people from the industry in one place. And so we had a little over 50 people who were stakeholders of the industry, farmers, product makers, service providers, who all got in the same room and said, he said, what do you want? What do we need to work together on? We're all in this together. Some of us are technically competitors, but we all know it's a big enough pie. Even a tiniest slice is going to be massive. So, what are the issues that we can pool our resources, pool our knowledge, aggregate those things that aren't your proprietary IP, so that we have a knowledge base, so that we have some standards, so we have a starting point. And since then, I've been an active board member with NACIA. We're currently, next week, actually, we invite you all on the 22nd. We'll be having our annual meeting. The first portion of it will be open to the public, and the second portion is for members. We do also have discounts for Woven members. So if you're a Woven member, we, as a sister organization, we think that it's really important for us to be thinking about how groups like Woven, IPIFF, AFFIA, the Australian Feed Insects Association, all different organizations that can represent different geographies, different markets, different needs and priorities of their members, can certainly get a lot of mutual benefit by having that cross-pollination of ideas, of technologies, of resources. So 2016, I also helped co-found a startup using black soldier fly here in Austin, worked with it for about 1.5 years, GrubTubs, helped raise about $250,000 in prize funding, and kind of once again realized that my interest is in promoting a wide variety of projects and initiatives and individuals and organizations, as opposed to focusing my time on one particular project, which nothing against that. We need entrepreneurs, we need founders, we need people who are focused on their thing. My knowledge base is very broad and very shallow. So I feel like I'm more effective as a connector than the person who's actually doing the things and doing the research. So then, the last few years, I've gotten a lot more active in the local Austin entrepreneurial, startup, ag tech, food tech, CPG spaces. And that's really led me to, we had already, through Little Herds, we'd been active at South by Southwest a few different times. But in 2019, we were invited by the Google Refresh Food and Tech event to bring edible insects to the event alongside other food solutions, by Danny Nierberg with Food Tank, who actually last night just won the Julia Child Award. I think like the 5th person to win it. So a really big thought leader. If you're not familiar with Food Tank, you should definitely check it out. They've had numerous articles throughout the past that have been, critical, honest looks at insects, agriculture, and its potential. So there's certainly, even though Danny Nierberg herself is a vegetarian, they are certainly, from a media standpoint, an advocate, an ally of the industry, because they, their values for a better, good food system, really align with, I think, a lot of our values as an industry. And so we were able to bring insects to South by Southwest and have, something like 1,200 people who were all, very much at South by Southwest to learn new things, discover new ideas, and take those back to where they're from. And that experience was phenomenal. We had some folks from around the country. If you're familiar with Bugable, Allie Moore, she's a great advocate for insect, especially edible insects, and has done some great work partnering some celebrities and influencers with edible insects. She did a great bit with the band Papa Roach, if you're familiar with like 90s US bad pop. And had a bunch of, famous musicians sit down and eat insects and talk about it. so all that led to this year, before the pandemic, we were organizing the largest food focused event at South by Southwest. And really, my goal there was to put insect agriculture and edible insects and insects as a feed and other uses on an equal platform to cellular agriculture, plant-based alternative proteins, other forms, kelp, seaweed, other future food solutions, show that insect agriculture is just as relevant and legitimate, and in a lot of ways has more potential than a lot of these other narrower solutions that don't interconnect the way that insect agriculture can with so many other industries. And so that was going to be amazing. We had the Kroger Zero Hunger Zero Waste Foundation as our presenting sponsor. We had WeWork Food Labs and SKU, which is a national US CPG accelerator program that has had, multiple exits and acquisitions from its alumni companies. Those were the folks that were helping us put this together. And then the pandemic hit. So we had to, South by Southwest got canceled. And we really, in a lot of ways, shifted our resources and our priority and my resources and my priorities, because that knocked out a significant portion of my and Little Herd's expected annual income. So trying to pick up the pieces and figure out what to do next. Since the pandemic started, my focus has really been on emergency food access initiatives here in my local community. And so I tell people before the pandemic, I was focused on getting people to eat bugs. Now I'm just focused on helping people eat, period. And since then, I've been able to help organize and execute a couple different initiatives that have collectively, fed something like 140,000 meals to people in need across the Central Texas area. And a lot of that is because of my experience with the insect industry and the food industry and the food tech space, and being able to call on people and say, help me figure out how to get discounts on this, or help me figure out these logistics solutions here. And a lot of the stuff that I've learned in that time, especially how to, at least here, how to apply for grants from city and municipal governments, how to become a government contractor, how to, quickly stand up cold supply chains, things like that are going to be incredibly helpful for the insect industry when those essential services of getting people fed are better dealt with, and there can be more room. But in the meantime, there's so many people that are continuing to move forward with insect agriculture in North America. And one of the things that I think has, at least from where my position talking with a lot of the folks in the industry, our industry hasn't been as hard hit as many other industries in the pandemic. Don't get me wrong, it's been bad for everybody. And in some ways, the folks in this industry are worse off because, at least in the US, we don't have, like a cricket farmer doesn't have access to the same types of recovery funds that a more traditional farmer might have. So in some ways, insect products were at a disadvantage because they aren't recognized as a commodity class product. So there's not as many ways for you to get the government-backed loans, the recovery funds, things like that. But at the same time, because of the nature of the industry, and because it's still, on the grand scheme of things, very small and very nimble, it was able to roll with the punches really well. And there've been some companies that have been able to very successfully transition from a focus on traditional retail sales to direct consumer sales, or focus more on that. And a lot of the companies that were already focused on direct customer sales, especially ones that were already on Amazon, like they have been able to at least do as well, if not better, than a lot of other CPG brands. And the reality is, especially with edible insects and CPGs, it's like 85% of CPGs fail within 2 years. So the fact that there are, I think if we broke down the numbers, our industry would be well above that threshold. It's still, it's hard when there's not as much, as an entrepreneur, I think it's hard when there's not as much sort of media validation of your idea that you're on the right track, when it doesn't seem like there's not as much interest or hype or fervor around the space. But I think, when we step back and we look at this last year, the last 2 years, the last 5 years, there's some real, all the milestones show that we're continuing to be on the right track in terms of the amount of investment, the types of investment, the shift in consumer perception. And I think in a lot of ways, the US is really one of the laggards in the world, if not the biggest one. Because I think even compared to the UK and the EU, Australia, I think in a lot of ways the US has been slower to adopt than a lot of people thought. And that there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think that we're seeing, even though it's been slower, it continues to move in the right direction, even if it's not, if it's not a, whatchamacallit, it's not like a slopey curve all straight up. It's at least a slow, steady curve, incline. And I think some of those big news things that we've seen in the last couple of years, the involvement of Cargill in the space, AgriProteins expansion to the US, just recently, Insect with a Y, the fact that they're publicly sharing that they have, interest in the US expansion in the US pet food market. I think pet foods is going to be a massive, massive opportunity. With pet foods right now in the US are at an all-time high in terms of the amount that pet owners are willing to spend and the number of pet owners. And that has only gone up with the pandemic. And when I talk to CPG, pet food CPG and pet food folks that aren't interested in insects, there's all of the trends that they're seeing in terms of health, allergen-free, sustainable, they all point to insects being a much better option. And it's just a matter of price and scale. And that's where the insects for feed technology and farming is going to be able to help bring the market price down to make that more viable. At the same time, there are already companies like Jiminy's that does cricket dog treats, and they're now moving into dog foods. They're making incredible strides in getting the regulatory approvals in the US for dog food for their products. And that's a big milestone. In the US, at this point, you can put them in dog treats and cat treats because they're not necessarily scrutinized the same way. And you can likely get away with it. That doesn't mean that if the regulators came knocking, you wouldn't have to back up what you're doing. But pet food is a whole different animal because it's the only thing that the animal's eating. It has to have specific nutritional requirements, whereas a treat is supplemental. So there hasn't been any national regulatory clarity or approval for pet food use. There are some companies, and here's another indicator of things being on the right track. Purina, one of the largest pet food makers in the US, they launched a pilot in the Chicago market because they were able to get regulatory approval in that state much more easily than they were on a national level. So in that market run is still going, and I haven't heard the final results, but when I last spoke to them, things were looking pretty optimistic. And the fact that a company has gone through the regulatory process of compiling their dossier and applying for GRAS to get the dog food on the market is, I think, will be a little bit of a watershed moment. There's, at the same time, some other good news. Virginia Emory with Beta Hatch up in Washington State, they do mealworm farming, similar to insect. They received some significant investment a couple of years ago, and they're now breaking ground on their new facility, which is going to be, I think in a lot of ways, if you go find, look for Beta Hatch and find the news, their facility is really doubling down on, being co-located with their substrate source to reduce the carbon footprint and increase the value add that they can provide as a waste mitigation strategy, which I think is another huge potential in stressing as an industry our potential for waste mitigation. And they're doubling down on automation and using smart technology to help better increase the efficiency of their farming practices. So those things that I'm seeing all point in the right direction. I think there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's a brand there in the UK. It's like Little Giants or Tiny Giants or something like that. They just launched a little snack food line, and they've got like really bright, colorful packaging. It's very much looks like a kid snack. I think there's so much potential, especially as the father of a 2-year-old. I'm constantly weighing how healthy something is versus how much work I have to do to get it into my kid. And cricket snacks I first fed her crickets when she had like her first couple of teeth, and she just chowed right down on them and was like demanding them for snack time every day for the next week. And parents are willing to pay a premium for something that's good for their kid and easy for them. So I think between the pet food space, between kids snacks, and when we've done a lot of the education outreach with Little Herds, we've seen, across the board, kids are more receptive. They don't have the psychological taboos entrenched. They're also just more open to, if they're open to trying new things. It's different than if you're trying to get them to eat all of their vegetables, because it's not coming from you, the parent. Especially if they're with friends who, try it first and say, oh, this is great. And we, when we go and do events where we have like roasted crickets with like a chili flavor, they'll try it and go, oh, this tastes like Takis, or this tastes like, hot Cheetos or spicy Doritos, which are the super unhealthy, cheap, mass-produced snacks that all the kids eat, and parents let them eat because it's not worth the battle. If they could have a substitute that's a little healthier, parents would definitely pay for that. So I think there's some really big categories that are still unexplored and untapped. And at the same time, I think the research that we're seeing, the regulatory, the movement on the regulations in the right direction that we're seeing, all point to much more potential in livestock as the production cost, as the unit cost comes down for the raw materials of the insect powders, especially black soldier fly. We're already seeing it get cost competitive with sustainable fish meals. So those producers, and we're seeing some examples of this in Europe, right? Seeing eggs and fish marketed specifically for their value add because they have insects as an ingredient, and that translates to a better, tastier, healthier animal. I think there's a ton of potential for that here in the US once the unit economics work, and I think we're really close to that. And seeing the expansion of insect and agri-protein, the adoption of Cargill and other big movers here, driving the innovation that's going to, lower those costs 5%, 10%, and that's going to be enough. That's going to be enough for it to be adopted into large-scale agriculture. And that's just going to continue to, in my personal opinion, it's going to continue to see that positive spiral of investment in the infrastructure, investment in the process, investment in the supply chain, vertical integration, and it's all going to, it's going to take time, but just like other food trends, the normalcy is moving in the right direction, and the unit economics are too. I think there's one other thing I wanted to mention, but I can't remember what it was now. So we had a couple of questions. Nick, did you want me to just jump into those?
Well, I was going to invite Massimo to give his question. You've had some heads up, so you know what it is, but I thought that might be a good way of doing it. Massimo?
Yeah, from the news, I haven't seen, I've seen many new startups in Europe in edible insect. Not so much going on in the US, but in the last 2 years, and I was wondering if there is any known reason for this not just lower growth in terms of market, but also in terms of new products. I mean, yeah, of course, I know chips, BT, but on the other side, not many other new players and chips, aside from the energy bars, which probably also are not going that well. So I was really curious about the reason for this.
Yeah, no, I think I alluded to this earlier. There has been 2013, we saw this massive spike in the amount of media interest. And since then, it's been on a decline. And there have been some spikes when big things happen. But across the board, it's kind of leveled off. And we're seeing some of that entrepreneur excitement fade in the same way, that there were a lot of companies that on the back of that 2013 report, or on the back of seeing the success of Exo, Biddy, these different companies that were getting Mark Cuban to invest, or, winning this Food Bites competition, or, winning $100,000 grant. There was excitement around that. And as that has declined, it's easy to take the lack of media reporting on it as a lack of activity, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. And again, don't get me wrong, like 85% of CPG startups fail within 2 years. So it's not at all surprising that we're seeing a lot of folks who were active, in 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17 that haven't lasted. But I think the ones that have, I think the Exo acquisition by Aspire, even though there hasn't been anything as analogous to that since then, I think that was still a milestone for the industry to have an inter-industry acquisition of a CPG brand by another company to vertically integrate. That's a great signpost of a healthy industry. So I think there's, between Biddy Foods, Chirps, there's a lot of other companies that if you go digging through the news, you can find them. One thing that's really obnoxious, at least I'll voice this as a personal gripe. There's so many companies that are putting out like market reports like, oh, edible insects CAGR growth by 2026, it's going to be amazing. And like 99.9% of those that I've seen are complete BS. And it's so obnoxious because my news feed used to be great for finding news stories about entrepreneurs and investment. And now it's completely cluttered by this garbage that it's just companies trying to get a big company to pay $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 for a bunch of stuff scraped from the internet. So I'll get off my soapbox for that, but it makes it more difficult to wade through the chaff and actually find the useful information. But some great examples I'll give you. Gym and Eat Crickets. So Gym like GYM in Eat EAT Crickets. Really, one person startup, really passionate founder. She's chugging along in her local market. I think she's a great example of that passionate entrepreneur. The other reality is, as many of you may know, one person founding teams rarely succeed. It's really difficult. So I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs like her that are just getting started. They're fresh, they don't have entrepreneurial experience. The other reality for startups and for, CPG new companies is that the average age for successful exits, is like 55. And that's because of experience, right? If you are experienced, if you have connections, if you have background in an industry, you're better equipped to succeed than someone who's fresh out of college and just has a passion and an idea. So I think there's in a lot of ways, the folks that are more likely to start an insect company have the deck stacked against them because they're younger, because they're fresh, because they don't have industry experience. We're seeing some of that change. Another great example is Sarah Schlafly with, I can't remember her name now because it's way too early in the morning and my coffee hasn't kicked in yet. She's in St. Louis, Sarah Schlafly with Mighty Cricket. Is that right? That sounds right. I can follow up and make sure that if you want to know more about these brands, but she's been doing it for a couple of years. She's got a really solid strategy. This last year, she did a marketing push in St. Louis and had like 50 restaurants in her local market, all making something out of crickets. It was a fantastic way for her to really secure a lot of brand awareness, a lot of local committed customers who then became repeat purchasers. So we're seeing things like that. I think that we're going to, in the next few years, as the pandemic leads, in my opinion, back to a resurgence and in investment in both new food categories and in new food production, technologies. We're going to see more and more interest in this space. And I think especially, like I said, the pet food market, there's multiple new pet snack brands that are coming out. And there's even companies that are targeting the smaller market of the small animal pets. So insects as a feed for your hedgehogs and your lizards and your birds and things like that. Avapost Farms, which is down in Florida, they were a Y Combinator alumni, and they purchased a farm in Florida. And really, this is Clara, this is my little cricket eater. They had this year, since the pandemic, they've become more profitable because they've seen more people staying home, interacting with their small animal pets, wanting the insects that they use for those, and they've been able to really see a lot of growth in this space. And because they're doubling down on the technology of the rearing and the processing, they're better positioned, and they're now fundraising, and they're in a much better position than they were even a year ago or 2 years ago after they came out of Y Combinator. So to answer the question, I think there is not as much media awareness around it, and the growth has certainly slowed. I don't think that we're seeing it. I think that we're going to continue to see it going in the right direction, even if it's not as hyped as it was. Nick, you're muted.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for that. Does anyone guess how things are going to play out? It seems to me that there's a lot of disputed territory. And we talked about this just before we sort of started, between the plant-based kind of burger and plant cell production of proteins and insects and other alternatives. I guess the stories that I'm seeing from the North American space are about these big, sexy companies in California that are getting a lot of sort of media interest, maybe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are there studies of the American consumer and their kind of attitude towards insects versus other alternatives?
Not a lot, and not as much. Like, I think there's been more in terms of like a market acceptance in the UK and the EU than there is in the US. Paul Rawson, professor at Pennsylvania State University, I think, psychologist. He's done some really good research on, it's fine. He's done some really great research on, the disgust factor and why some people are culturally inclined to be opposed to eating insects. And he did some great research, I think, that got published last year. And they did some surveys through, Mechanical Turk. I got to finish. You got to go with Mama. And they surveyed a bunch of people in the US and in India. And they found that it was something like 85% of the US respondents were open to the idea of eating insects. That doesn't mean they're going to. It certainly doesn't mean they're going to go out and buy a product, but they're open to it. And I think that's still a huge leap, seeing something like that validated. I think it also needs to be validated on a bigger scale. I think it depends on a lot of factors. But so I think that we're seeing more people become more open to it. We're seeing younger generations, millennials and Gen Zs, be more open to it than older generations who have more of that psychological taboo, more entrenched. We certainly think that with Little Herds, that introducing it to a kid in elementary school, by the time they're in high school, they don't think it's weird. They're actually doing research papers on edible insects because we fed them bugs 4 or 5 years ago with Little Herds, which is really cool. To the plant-based and the cell meat
coming through on the chat. Can you?
Yeah. I want to address yours on plant proteins. The plant proteins and cell-based proteins have certainly sucked a lot of air out of the media market and the investments for insects. But I think there's and we can have longer discussions on that. There's a lot of potential for allyship between the plant-based markets and cellular meat markets with the insect markets. And with cellular meat, I think insects, both from the potential of nutrient substrate for your cellular meat has to have nutrients to grow. Insects may be a really good way to get those nutrients at scale. And that's a bottleneck the industry has. Or the potential of cellular insect agriculture, actually growing meat with insect cells. The initial research that's out there shows that that's incredibly promising. And I think if companies are willing to invest in in those companies that are doing it the way they are now, if they can do it with insect cells and it's going to be cheaper to produce and more resilient, they're certainly going to do it. Let's see. Are you finding that farms are targeting multiple markets, or are they focusing on specializing, or does specialization come in a more at the processor stage? Most of the farms that we're seeing are really selling to anybody and everybody. Their specialization is more on species. Crickets are really focused on food, to some degree pet treats and pet foods, because there's a premium there that livestock feed doesn't have. And then mealworms straddle that in between point, and then black soldier fly, you know, is primarily or only for feed. With black soldier fly, and here's I'll put out a controversial opinion. I think black soldier flies are going to be in our food. I think there's no reason why black soldier flies shouldn't be in our food. If they're raised on a clean substrate, they're just as clean as any other insect that we're going to be eating. I think the reason that we don't eat them is because we as an industry have a psychological taboo against the idea of black soldier fly larvae as a food, because we've all been sort of we've programmed ourselves to think that, this is a feed insect, and crickets and grasshoppers and mealworms, those are food insects, not this. But the reality is black soldier flies have proteins and fats that make them taste delicious, just the way that mealworms and crickets do. So I think that there's, you know, as we move in an industry and grow, we're going to see the industry, I think, operating the same way that something like corn or soy does. You don't grow soy for food and soy for feed. You don't grow corn for food and corn for feed. You grow corn and you grow soy, and then it's turned into a variety of things. I think our industry is going to go the same way. You're going to have farms that are farming for the raw material. That's going to be used in a variety of ways, depending on its quality, depending on its specifications, depending on its inputs. How much interest is there in the US and Native American traditions in eating insects? Also, is there something of an insect hub developing in Ontario with Intimo Farms and Aspire? Yeah, I think the Canadian government has done a great job of investing real dollars into R&D, and a lot of companies in Canada have. I think Canada is leading the U.S. in that innovation space, certainly, and that's a big. You know, Aspire even said it publicly in their articles. The big reason why they chose London, Ontario, as opposed to something in the U.S. was because the Canadian government put a lot of money down and said, we as a government willing to invest big in this idea because we think there's potential. We think it's going to bring economic growth. I think that's a great sign. And I think things like that will then incentivize the US and other markets to put those, municipal and government dollars into it. In terms of interest in the US with Native American traditions, there's certainly some. I think there could be a lot more. I think it's still something that's not very well understood. And I think, at least from my research, there are quite a few indigenous tribes that had traditional use of insects. And as we're seeing more people become interested in recognizing and respecting those traditions, those indigenous cultures and their traditions and especially their food cultures, I think we're going to see more interest in those pre-colonial and even pre-Hispanic, uses of insects. And so one great example, Massimo, to you, an example of a CPG brand that has been around since before me, back in 2010, Monica Martinez in California with Don Baguito. Hey, hun, you need to start the coffee maker. Sorry. Don Baguito is still around. They are they're still selling, and their packaging has just gotten more and more beautiful over the years. Their production costs have gone down over the years. They're now selling multiple species and multiple flavors, savory and sweet, and their focus is on it being as a pre-Hispanic food. It's something that those indigenous cultures ate. And so that idea of old foods being new and ancient things being ancient things that are healthy and good for us that we as a Western food culture have lost touch with being brought back to a focal point. I think those are trends we're seeing across CPG categories, and insects can certainly fit within those. Okay. And I've got to jump off here just a minute to relieve my partner, but if there's any other questions, I'd love to take them. And Nick, I'm happy to, please provide my contact information to everybody. I'd love to. For those of you that I haven't had a chance to really meet and talk to one-on-one, I would really like to. I love to connect and help understand, what you're interested in, what questions you need to find answers for, and who I know that can help you find those answers.
Okay, so you're going to head off, RNA, are you? That's fine, of course. If anyone would like to stay on the line and just give us any feedback on how this went, not about RNA, but just about the format.
Yeah. Wait till I'm gone to really dunk on me.
Okay, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you all. This is really great.
Look after yourself. Okay, good. So yeah, I just thought we've got a couple of extra minutes. Would anyone like to say, do they think it's a good idea, this kind of format?
Oh, Clara, you were
able to. Not a lot of pee, and it was kind of dark. Yeah,
okay. Did you put fruit in your water? I won't do that. Clara, did you hold your pee all night long?
No. Okay, and if everyone's good, we can wrap up. David, do you want to say a bit more about what you're doing in Myanmar? Would that be of interest to people? I know.
Well, look, I'll just say, you know, for me, it's fantastic to have such a fast mind dump of some of the things that are going on in America. I think we probably could have, you know, heard it about 5 times over. And I guess one of the things, well, actually, there's so many things of interest there. One that was particularly interesting, I'm very interested in cross-society pollination and interaction. So, you know, the fact that he's mentioned that the NACIA meeting on the 22nd will have a general section, I think that's really, really great. And I guess I'm very interested in seeing a range of the insect societies in providing reciprocal rights to members, so that you don't have you know, 10 people at this meeting. You know, there should have been 100. There's probably 100 people who were interested in this meeting but didn't know it was on. So I think we've probably, as an industry, we've got to get a little bit better at a whole range of those different things. I'll say, you know, I don't know what people want to know about our work, but I guess we're sort of taking a very broad range to studying things in Myanmar and looking at different species. And I'll just say, to me, it's mind-boggling how much you can find out as time goes on. So, you know, so only this week, I've found 2 new insects in the country that are being eaten. So one being eaten by one type of spiders being eaten by a Chin group who migrated from Chin state to northern Rakhine state, and they eat an orb harvest spider, has a long-standing tradition. Another group in the north of the country who eat stink bugs, and this is something I found out about 10 years ago, and it's taken me about 9 years to get any further information on it. So it's like here there's a huge amount of tradition that we've just been unable to capture because so much of the research that's gone on in the country has been from a Western agriculture focus. So I'll say that there's huge interest, and aquaculture here is so large. The big stepping off point will be in how do you stimulate better interaction between aspects of the system and the aquaculture system. So I don't see that our focus should be on just on promotion of insects, but it's on promotion of different food systems, some that are that make commercial sense, etc. And I guess one of the things that I might have asked RNA a question on is, well, you know, next year's the UN 21 year of food systems. So what can the the UN Food Systems Summit 2021. So, you know, what coordinated approach might the international insect industry be able to take towards some of those would be a question that would make some lovely discussion.
Well, that'd be a good one for kind of all the different international groups to take on. Yeah. I was just coming back to Massimo's question about sort of things that are happening in the North America and that we're not seeing the new products coming out. I think what just again informally, it seems to me an easier sell to incorporate insects into dishes, either in a restaurant or as a kind of as recipes, than to create products that you can sell in supermarkets that have insects in. And Massimo's got a lot of experience of this. And I don't know if it's something to do with the price point, the fact that it's inherently quite an expensive product, expensive ingredient, whether the tastes don't lend themselves so well to products that then have a shelf life, or whether you need to be able to sort of combine them with spices and herbs in a way that you can when you're cooking in a restaurant or at home, that may be harder to do in a product. But it's an observation. It seems to be, I'm hearing a lot more about chefs with kind of exciting ideas than I am about new products coming into the market. Interested in any observations or comments on that from different perspectives.
The thing is that in Europe, I've seen maybe 50 new startups in the past 2 years with new products, despite the problem with the regulation that we all know. While so it's a lot of food design and new products coming out. So it seems it's going somewhere, because actually 4 years ago, 5 years ago, aside from the energy bars, we had very little example of products, while now in Europe there is definitely a variety. While the US is, where aside from the energy bars, it was 2 startups 5 years ago and still 2 startups, chips and BT. And the only one that was doing something really innovative, One Up Kitchen in Canada, they shut down operation. So it seems to me that on the consumer side, the products, when I talk about edible insect product, I mostly think of insect as an ingredient in a processed food that gets packaged, and not much in whole insects, but this is my personal view. So in terms of integration, like you said, by chefs, yeah, even for the packaged products, I see this as integrating the insects as an ingredient. Probably, yeah, it's not easy to enter the mainstream food distribution, and the price, as you said, can be also an obstacle. But still, I don't totally get why the US is so flat in terms of that kind of packaged products.
Yeah, I think he was very good at giving an upbeat message, wasn't he? And maybe. I
don't want to say it, but yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, and it's kind of just at 2 o'clock now, so I'm going to finish. But did anyone else want to make a final point? David, you look like you're wanting to say something. You're muted, I think.
First question is for David Allan, is that RNA talked about reintroducing insects to people who had lost them because the Western diet had overtaken, whereas you seem to be looking at insects which indigenous people have never stopped using. Has this been introduced back into the cities where people might have had more Western diet, or are you just studying people in the indigenous use and not promoting that anywhere else?
Well, at present, we're really just, there's a couple of different arms. So there's one arm in terms of just looking at ethnographical practice and, you know, what actually is happening, because so little of it's been documented as a result of Myanmar being so isolated for such a long time for military-related reasons, and there really being an embargo on sharing information and an embargo on doing research on anything, really. So it's like there's a lot of information that some people know about, but it's not captured. And Myanmar has a lot of ethnic groups, and they're, you know, with the civil wars going on, their information hasn't been valued as much as the Burmese mainstream information. So that's one sort of stream. So then we're looking at all of that information to say, okay, well, what can you actually do to then make markets that are actually profitable, so that we have a chance of getting some insect products into supermarket shelves where they don't exist at this point in time. So, and if you look at, so we've done some work sort of tracking, well, what is the size of different value chains in the country? How much are they? How much are they worth? How large are they? how do they actually function, who runs them, and some of them are incredibly well organized and actually very exploitative of native insects and local people who don't know the value of them. You know, people who are exporting to Thailand, for example, high value insects that they tell people are worth nothing in Myanmar. But the big question is, what can we actually do to build on current food practices? And then actually where I think the really big benefit is how can you somehow, or is it possible to somehow morph that into the feed system, given the fact that the feed system for aquaculture is in fact importing an extraordinary amount of product at this point in time. So that sort of tells you that there's a range of things that should be possible to farm locally to help have a satisfactory price point in the feed industry, for which aquaculture and poultry are huge. So we sort of say, well, you know, let's talk about insects as one of many things that fit into the overall food system, not trying to go troppo on insects being the only future solution. But how do you have an integrated solution that makes sense?
I'm heading off. Keep talking if you want to. I'll leave you to manage that, David.
Okay. So thanks very much, David. Am I allowed one more question to Massimo, or does anyone else want to say anything? No. Massimo, you're talking about using insect to as an ingredient. Is there, you can replace something that exists in a like-for-like business, but is there something about insect ingredient that is much better? For example, can it make bread rise more? Can it add to the flavor? Can it do something that existing ingredients can't do that the insect ingredient, although more expensive, does better?
Well, the problem, I don't talk about insect protein, although of course, most of the people think of edible insects as a protein source mostly. But I'm not sure insects are competitive as just a protein source with other protein sources. So I prefer to consider it as a superfood that you may add to a product, a food product, for the nutritional properties. At the moment, the industry is so new, it's just 5 years old, that we are start understanding a little about how to farm insects, to process them. But very little has been done outside from drying and grinding the insects into a powder. So in the future, you may have hydrolyzation to make it soluble. We may extract the amino. I'm not a food engineer, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But I see a lot of developments like that. But I think on the price side, I mean, I'm here with Cyril from Cricket Lab. I'm visiting Cricket Lab, one of the biggest farm in Thailand, and we are having a meeting tonight. And their price level is not comparable at all with the price level in Europe. And some farms and processors I've been speaking to, they say that in the future it might be possible to have cricket flour, let's say at €10 per kilo. So the price point is a problem now.
$6 to $7 is probably is the goal. Yeah.
So the price problem will probably go away, and then integrating this in products, food products, to me is probably the best idea. Although I can see now, I'm talking about edible insect as food, and the pet food with crickets, I didn't expect that to happen, but in the past year, it seems it's going faster than insects for food. Not sure if I entirely answered your question. Sorry.
No. That's as we said earlier, is that sort of one group of people can produce the food, and then it's up to other people to find a use or a direction where it might be used profitably. Okay. Okay, so those are all my questions. Is anyone else anything to say, or are we just going to wind it up there? 8 minutes past 2. We've done our hour. Is that well? Those that have stayed to the end, thank you very much. That's been good. I enjoyed the art, and we've got we're back again in November, and if I were better prepared, I could tell you the date and who it is, but I'm sure you're all subscribing to Woven News. It'll be in that in the next few days. Okay.
Perfect.
So
thank you
very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.